Hello there, Voltage Modular people, PoohBear here, and welcome to my channel. And today we're going to do just a technical update of VoltBall and just have a quick look at all the little changes which have really gone on there. And obviously I've been using VoltBall as part of the Pulse to my Generative piece, and we'll have a good old chat about this Generative project and some of the tricks I'm actually using, because obviously, you know, you don't have to necessarily use VoltBall as the center, you could be using other things, but you might pick up on some of the other tricks I'm doing, which you may find quite useful. So this is currently what VoltBall looks like out there, and this is the new version. It looks quite a bit different, but in fact, actually, it's very, very similar. I have to say, I did quite a heavy technical video on this one, so you know the pitch stuff is the same. Obviously, these output ports have just been moved to the bottom, so there's been a few things moved around, and obviously the G spot has been enlarged and made a lot more useful. Hopefully, as you could probably hear what was going on. So let's actually start at the top. I'm going to put my mouse down here so we get rid of some of these wires. So the big difference at the top really is, I suppose, we've got this auto button. So now when you click auto on, it overrides the pitch and the gate, and this will take the input from the I/O panel. So you don't even have to plug in your keyboard. If you was wishing to play the game, click on the auto and you can start using your keyboard to move the bat around. Let's jump to the bottom. As I say, there isn't really much difference to the output ports of the banks, so they're the same. Retro, pause is all the same, all that's the same. So really it is everything what's going on inside this G spot, which have actually changed quite a bit. We can have a maximum of 8 balls, and hence we've got 8 lots of controls. So now we've got individual controls on each of the balls of what they're going to do, which comes down to, we can set an initial speed of each of the balls. We can decide if a ball's going to collide into another ball, but for that to actually happen, obviously you need a minimum of 2 balls, and both of them would have to have balls selected. If you only selected one with, say, ball collide, and the other one didn't, they won't actually collide. Do you wish to collide with the bat or not? And do you wish to collide with the ship which comes along or not? And as I say, we can set the initial speed. Just on where it says number of balls, you can click on this and you can scroll this up and down. So I suppose that's something I should actually do a little bit more, maybe probably put that into more of a digital counter actually, so that makes it a little bit clearer. Obviously we've got our question mark, so that can bring up all the help, so that might actually help a little bit. So the first button is what we refer to as our drag factor. So that could be that we could set a semi-fast speed for the initial of that one ball, and if we've got bat and ship enabled, when we hit a ship we can actually make the ball go faster. If we hit the bat, we can make it go faster or slower. And the drag factor is how quick or slow are we going to go from that speed back to its initial state. So you can go quite quickly, or it actually can be quite a nice slow drag back to that speed. We've also got a ship hit speed, so obviously the higher that is up, when we hit a ship, the faster the ball is actually going to ricochet off it. We've got this bat size, which maybe we didn't have that before, but this bat size can actually stretch all the way across. So obviously in G spot you never lose the ball because it hits the bottom, but now you can actually stretch the bat out so it's always going to hit the bat. And because obviously the bat itself, let me just click that off. The bat itself has got some very funny, I don't want to call it physics, I'm going to call it logic, set up in it, because I don't really follow proper physics with my ball colliding and everything else. And the bat, I've set up more as a game bat. So if you was actually to hit the bat quite close to the end, it's actually going to force the ball directly back on itself. And depending where you hit it on the bat, it depends what angle it's going to come off at. So obviously proper physics would be, if we're hitting the ball at any of these places, it should really ricochet over the same, but I haven't done it. I've actually got different angles depending where you hit it. And that's obviously to add a bit of chaos to what's actually going on. And the final one is really, I've called this drag factor on the bat. It's probably not quite the right terminology. In this particular case, when it's set to 0, it's not going to affect the ball at all. If it goes below when it's set to 1, it won't affect the ball at all. When you go below 1, it will actually slow the ball down. So this will go from 1 down to you can see 0.01, which really does make the ball go really, really slow. So let's just get one ball going, shall we? So when it hits the ball, it's just going to really, really slow it down. And there's the drag factor kicking back in. I don't know if you saw that speed up again. So let's we can make this bat nice and big. This is going to hit it. It's going to go really slow, and it's going to go, and it's getting faster and faster and faster. That might be a better way of doing it. Hey, there we go. It's going to catch up. So what you need to do is work out the speed of the ball, the drag factor, to make sure the ball can obviously get fast again, because every time it hits the bat is actually going to be a percentage of the speed it's actually going to slow it down by. So if you had a very fast ball and you have this set up a bit more of a sensible rate in it to slow it down a bit, and the next time round it slow it down a bit more and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, so on and so forth. But if you set your drag factor right, you should actually get that ball going back up to the correct speed. So yeah, that's that. And yeah, the ship hit speed is a straightforward one. When we do hit the ship, if we've got the ship enabled, it'll obviously hit that as well. And that's really basically it on the update. There's not really much more to say. The game side of it works exactly the same as it did before, and the way all the ports come out work exactly the same way as they did. So really, I think what we should do is actually have a look at this inside this actual generative piece of what's actually going on, because as you heard at the start, we actually had quite a few bits and bobs going on. And if I was to come down here, let's see, let me just I'm going to mute this out because that's just a constant tone which is going on in the background, but it does get changed. And I'm just going to turn this on now. Probably going to need the more balls because everything else is affecting everything else. So let's just mute that side out. Now, obviously, when this ball is hitting, say, the top, that's going to affect the kick. When it's hitting the left or the right, I can't remember which way around, it's going to affect the snare. And one actually does the percussion. And I think I'm also using the bottom as well. So really, I suppose I should make sure my bat's a little bit shorter as well. Also, I don't know if you noticed the bat was moving. That's because I had another ball which was ricocheting and hitting something. So I had something else off, which was then coming down and making sure the bat moves. I've got like a little LFO which will move it left or right, but it won't move it until a ball's hit, which will open up a gate. So that's really essentially what I'm using G-Spot for, really, at the end of the day, is for the pulse, for the gate information. We can take the information out and we can actually sort of convert that into gate. But I suppose one of the semi-interesting things, or as you can hear, is obviously with the drums, and we've got some snares, and we've got some other things going on, they're all staying in time, but yet the ball's obviously hitting at different speeds. Let me just really slow that down, really. Just playing around with the drag factor, then I should have been slowing it down up here. Now the advantage, you may be thinking, well, we've got these options where we can turn the bat and the ship on and off, so what's the advantage of turning them all off, say, for instance? Well, that's going to give us quite a consistent ball which is moving around. Sorry, I just needed to pause that a bit. It's going to give us like quite a consistent ball moving around, which is something what sometimes you need. You need something a little bit more rigid, and so nothing else is really going to affect it. But it's also going to be random of when it's sort of hitting the sides. But going around, so 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. You can see it's roughly going to always hit the same kind of speed. Here, bringing something like the bat in, well, you could bring some chaos into it. So it's now no longer going to take 4 to go around. It's going to hit the bat. We can either speed it up, we can slow it down, and obviously with the drag factor, that's going to take an effect on it. The more you open it up, like with the ship, you can going to get even more chaos. And in fact, in one of the projects I've built this in, I even had some balls which didn't do anything outside apart from cause chaos inside by ricocheting, hitting the balls and making them all go off different directions. Now, Generative, I love talking about generative projects and generative as a whole. I always refer to my pieces as hybrid generative because I do use certain little patterns and I'm randomly selecting maybe which pattern to run. I think interestingly, many years ago, I read this article which was actually written decades previous to that, to do with the very first generative piece which was recorded, and it was done at a university, and they used a number of magnetic tapes. I think it was about 5 or 6 magnetic tapes, which they streamed around the office. So they had all these different length tapes and had some notes on them. And they said, hey, here we go. This is our first generative piece. Being at a university, mathematicians came along, worked it out, done all the measurements, calculated the speed of the tape drives and said, actually, you've actually got a pattern there because it's going to repeat itself every 28 days, I think they calculated it out to be. So then being in the university, the other people come along and looked at it and philosophized and said, well, actually, could you really remember that pattern after 28 days? As I say, I don't know what the music was sounding like, if it was just a plink plonk kind of sounds or not. So the answer could be, well, no, if it was just a plink plonk type of pattern which was coming out, you wouldn't really memorize it. But obviously generative has sort of grown, but I still refer to myself as hybrid generative because I do tend to use a little bit more pattern. I used to make more drone type generative pieces, and I've moved on to more faster, upbeat, more I'm not going to say you'd use the word more musical because I do actually like the slower stuff. More pop, hey, there's a word to use. A bit more pop like, so I'm trying to get some repetition maybe into it because that's what pop music's all about, a lot of repetition. And just trying to sort of stabilize it a bit that way to make it a bit different. It's a bit harder to do, I think, as well. And I suppose I always like myself a challenge. So as I say, we've got this going around, it's doing its hits. We then take the information out. I've got them going into their individual radgets, which I did a video on how to actually do it. So obviously this one here, I know happens to be doing ball 2. This is doing ball 1. Because obviously if you come down here, I say obviously, you click on here, it tells you at the moment, because this is my bass note. Obviously if I change this, we can see it all changing here. So 64 is something I just happen to always sort of stick around on. So there's number 64. Over here, if I was to click on this note, you can see there's number 64 at the top. So when the bat is hit, bank 1, it's going to go there, and it's actually going to register up here. Obviously we haven't got bat set on at the moment, but if bat was set on, then it'd register up here, then I can take that output and I can go off and do something with it. Just so happens, this particular one ball, as I say, is affecting the kick, it's affecting the snare, and the other side is one's affecting the percussion and the other one is actually affecting what percussion we're going to hear. So again, I think another one of my videos, I had this little setup where this is actually morphing this drum machine. So we've got a little pattern which we could choose from. I think about 36, 37 patterns, or there 41 patterns I've got inside this. So that's selecting one of the patterns. This is then selecting the kind of sound we're playing, and that's all being affected by depending what's happening with the ball. But again, I haven't really spoken about how does this all stay in time, because this ball obviously can take a different amount of time to get around, and it could hit here and here very, very quickly. Well, storing forward, if you think about the name, is a bit like an old messaging system. And as you can see, we've actually got quite a few messages inside this, and that happened because earlier I sped the ball up and we're pumping more messages into storing forward than we can empty it. So you should bear that in mind. So what actually happens with storing forward is it can actually obviously do its hit. We can pass that information out, and this is actually in a live mode, and we feed it into storing forward, and it just grab that piece of information and then it'll pump it out at a set time. And in fact, the drum stuff happens to be set to like whole notes. So every bar, that's actually going to send a signal out. So if I was to hit a drum and a snare at the same time, it would be a bar between the drum changing its pattern and then the snare changing its pattern, and so on and so forth. But it will mean it's going to change it on the bar, because obviously we reset everything together, and the speed it's actually going at is actually set by the tempo. So all these storing forwards and everything else is running from the tempo, so we can change the tempo. We're obviously going to change the way things are going to work, especially if we haven't changed the speed of the ball as well. And that is how a lot of the processing is done within this particular generative project. I may take some of the information out and go through my in ranges, and I go through my in ranges simply because I might say, well, actually, I'm only interested in above 80. I refer to them as notes. I know these are all CV signals which are purely coming out of here, but I wouldn't say quantized them, but I have quantized them, yeah, effectively. So they are matching MIDI notes. So it's an easy way of thinking of it. So if you was actually to go out and play that, that would actually play an E4. So, you know, you can actually think of it as MIDI notes. So I can then say, well, 80, if you look down here, would be ball number 3, because obviously ball 1 is from 64 to 71, and ball 2 would be from 72 to 79, ball 3 from 80 to 87, won't it be? And then it'd be 88, and so on and so forth for each of your balls going up. And so effectively up here, I'm saying to it, I want from ball 80 to ball, well, to anything 80 and above, I'm going to take and I'm going to push over here. But the advantage or the disadvantage, or not the advantage, I can push it over to here, but then I'm actually only interested in that one ball, because that's what that's saying. This is all I'm actually processing, is that one ball. Again, as I say, this is processing the first ball. This is processing the second ball. So you can just see by the numbers, you can click on it, and obviously we can take the feeds out. So obviously that'd be a bat here. That would be top, left, right, bottom, missed a ship. So if you was playing the game, that would be if you hit the ship or something, and that would be if you lost the ball, or you have to look at the help and it would tell you. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Am I on the right screen? Yes, I am on the right screen. So that's effectively all I'm doing, and then I can take these information, and they are going through other storing forwards, but obviously this is like in 16th, so when stuff's coming through onto this one, I'm playing like the bass, so I'm taking stuff out and pumping it out, and actually going to do gates on the bass. Another one's obviously taking it and doing the gates and choosing which notes to play as well. So I've got a lot of things that might come to the store and forward. We'll send off some extra triggers here and there. You're going to see a lot of in-ran-rans, which would then, so over here, another ball, when it hits, it's actually going to choose not just what chord we're playing. So over here, I've got like loads of chords pumped into this jazzy jukebox, and it's randomly choosing a chord here, which then goes into my poly breakout. I then take one of them, obviously the real lowest note, that goes off to do the bass for me. I'm then randomly choosing which one of these notes I'm going to take, and that would be actually then pumped down to the lead. I am also taking some of this other information, and that'll be going down to the stabs. So I've got some chord stabs going on as well. You know, so there's quite a bit you can really do, and you can fire off. But the story forwards are really great for this live mode, where you can actually store data, and it doesn't have to be perfectly on time. So you could have a random process, and rather than trying to get it in time and all the rest of it, you can say, well, fine, I can just take my bit of data out, shove it into here. At the moment, this is in a mode which is looking for any CV change. So the downside about this mode is if I wanted the same note twice, it won't receive it. It's got to be, this is looking for CV changes, and basically this records all CV changes. You can soon fill up the buffer if you're just trying to record audio something, but you know, this will record all CV changes. But then we've also got a gate mode, so I can obviously put it in the gate mode, so when that gate's open, it'll only record. And then the very bottom mode is, it's obviously needs a gate per CV. So it doesn't matter, once it's read that CV signal, if that CV changes, it doesn't care. It's read it once, that's all it's interested in. So that's like normal keyboard sort of mode. But again, if you've got a kind of random processor which is sort of changing, which is out of time, you can still sort of probably grab that process using something like an on-change trigger, which would trigger a gate, which then push it into here. You could record it, and then you could output it more in time. So it's great for doing that kind of thing, and I think it really does work. Well, hopefully you heard what you know at the beginning, what you was listening to, and it did sound like it is reasonably in time. And that's literally how it's all doing, and that's really all what the balls are up to. As I say, I make real good use of the in-ran-rans, because these are obviously choosing the drum patterns. So these are obviously going off to my jazzy jukebox and then choosing exactly which drum pattern we're going to play, or you know, the kick, more to the point. So even though I've only got something like 8 slots in the kick, I think I've only got like 8 slots in this one here. So that's 8 times 8, so you've got 64 variations, and then obviously I've got 40 odd down here. I think it works out like over 500 variations I've got in a way of a drum pattern. I think of it as really as 8 patterns or 500 variations, and it even becomes even more because we've obviously got this perk, which is also then changing the sound. So on the fly, we're also changing the sound. So before I go into too much of a waffle mode, because I know what I'm going to be like, I think that is really the crux of this particular project. Um, and yeah, there's not really too much else to say about it. The radages are actually splitting the ball and splitting the signals from the ball, which I can then take. Auto senses I'm using quite heavily because obviously I'm then taking all these signals and then they're going to obviously output their individual changes. Obviously on this particular one I'm not actually using too much, by the looks of it I'm only using a few of the top ones. So it's like I'm using the back change, which is then probably going off, and which is probably going off over this way. Oh, I was choosing what note, so it's changing notes around and things. Um, oh, that one's changing the chords. So that's probably so that's the second ball, and that second ball I happened to have originally not set up to hit anything, and again it was going quite slow. So that would just sort of randomly do its stuff. Whereas the other balls, especially with the bass in that, they were really going fast because then they were kicking off, doing some octave. I got my octave, my rocker bass, which I usually always sort of talk about. So yeah, I've got a bass here where I'm rocking the octave. So I've got one note coming down, and then obviously with my flip-flop counter, I'm changing the octave of it. So I'm playing it up and down an octave. And this one's doing the stereo. Sorry, this is doing the stereo stuff from one speaker to the other speaker. This has obviously got that new little change I've done to my flip-flop counter. So I'm using the 0 on this just to try and take out some of the clicks and pops, which works quite nicely. Yeah, so so that's it. I better shut up and really just say, well, thank you for watching. Let's see if we can get this going again, even though I've played around with some of the settings. We should be all right. I think I need to slow a few things down, probably speed a few things up, and yeah. Say thanks for watching, and bye for now.